Deputy Speaker. Can I join with those thanking the Prime Minister for setting out how clearly the safety of the world relies on this moment and the future of Ukraine. And Madam Deputy Speaker, I for one am saddened that the member for Clacton is no longer in his place, because he might learn a thing or two, given that his previous advice to Prime Ministers was that President Macron, when he was elected, would loathe us and would be anti-British. How out of depth and out of touch with the British national interest that advice is, given the coalition that the Prime Minister is building and the concern that all of us have to use resources effectively. Could he tell us a little bit more about what conversations he's had with our European allies about how we can reduce the duplication of effort involved in the plans going forward, please? Prime Minister.
Well, I thank her for a question. I do think it's important we work with our European allies, whether that's ramping up spending or capability, but the point she makes about coordination is also important. We have to learn the lessons of the last 3 years. Many European allies and others have provided capability to Ukraine, but it hasn't been coordinated enough. And our collective security and defence, to my mind, requires that we coordinate our efforts much more closely as well.
Sir John Whittingdale.
Thank you, Madam Deputy Speaker. Does the Prime Minister share my concern and sadness that any settlement appears to involve acceptance of the Russian occupation of parts of the sovereign territory of Ukraine? And will he recognise that the Baltic nations will now feel even more exposed? And while I welcome his telephone conversations with the leaders at the weekend, can he give an assurance that they will be at the table for any future discussions of European security?
On the question of territory, obviously there's discussions to come, but I take the tenor of what he says. On the Baltic states, I mean, he's right. I was over at the GEF meeting in Estonia just before Christmas to have discussions with them. I've been to the front line in Estonia twice now, where we've got British troops. They feel very immediately the threat for very obvious reasons. I spoke to them yesterday morning at some length, and I assured them that we need to look at the configuration again when we have meetings of European and other allies to make sure the Baltic states are properly represented, because for them the threat is very, very clear and very, very near.
David Burton-Sampson.
Thank you, Madam Deputy Speaker, and I thank the Prime Minister for his statement and his outstanding global leadership that he's showing on this issue. I too have returned from Ukraine last week after 5 days, and the one consistent message the Ukrainian people I met gave me, from residents to soldiers to businesses to politicians, was their immense gratitude for the leadership and support that the UK have shown since day one of this illegal war. Does the Prime Minister agree with me that now is the time that we remain resolute as a House for the sake of the Ukrainian people, and that our 100-year partnership between our two countries is now more important than ever?
The 100-year partnership signals the depth of our relationship. I too have heard those thanks for leadership, and I think it's right that I paid tribute to the party opposite for the leadership that they showed from the very beginning of this conflict, which I was able to follow as leader of the opposition.
George Freeman.
Thank you, Madam Deputy Speaker. Could I add my voice to those congratulating the Prime Minister on the way he's conducted the last week and the policy, which I think enjoys, if not unanimous, largely unanimous support in this House. I gently point out to the member for Clacton, our enemies watch this chamber, and speaking with one voice is very important, and I congratulate also the Leader of the Opposition. Does he agree with me that, as well as willing the means, the ends, we need to will the means? And could I ask gently at what point he thinks, the Prime Minister thinks he'll be bringing forward a business plan, a proposal for how we fund what is likely to be 50, 60, possibly more, 70 billion over the next 5 to 10 years, so that our threat, our military threat, is credible, serious, and something we can actually afford?
As soon as we've got any details around plans, I will bring them to the House with the details so they can be fully discussed, because this needs to be not just a short-term response, but a much longer-term assessment of how we ensure that Europe is kept safe and secure.
Jacob Collier.
Deputy Speaker, can I thank the Prime Minister for his continued leadership on the world stage? And these past few days I've felt particularly proud to be British, so can I thank him for that? The government is rightly already using frozen Russian assets to fund Ukraine's defence and reconstruction. But can I ask the Prime Minister what further actions are being considered to ensure that Russia pays the full financial cost of its illegal invasion?
Well, Russia's already paying the cost through the interest. We need to look at whether we can go further on that, but it is complicated and we have to act with others, and I'll see what progress we can make and let the House know if there is progress.
Lee Dillon.
Thank you, Madam Deputy Speaker. I too had the honour of being in Ukraine for the 3rd anniversary, and as other honourable members have said, whether it was communities, military personnel or Ukrainian politicians, the gratitude expressed to our nation to stand strong with the Ukrainians was clear to see. Before going to Ukraine, I held a round table in my constituency of Newbury, and Ukrainians who are here, Prime Minister, are clear on the thankfulness for being given safety, but also the need for the visa schemes to be amended so that children can finish their education and that they can meaningfully secure employment without having time-limited visas. So will the government review that to make sure that we stand with Ukrainians here in the UK as well as those in their home country?
Well, we'll take the points you make into consideration. Obviously, the immediate situation confronting us is the question of how we settle the peace, but he's right to raise these other concerns.
James Frith.
Thank you, Madam Deputy Speaker. Can I add my voice to those around the country that have said how proud they are of our British Prime Minister and indeed how proud they are to be British. He has led from the front, and I hope very much in the years, months and the weeks to come, I should say, that he will hold that in mind and strengthen his resolve as we move forward. He has already made reference to one of the priorities that Stefan Harhe, the chair of Berry's Ukrainian Association, raised with me on the release of the 20,000 children who have been kidnapped, forcibly removed and forcibly placed into Russia. Will he commit to getting their release and updating the House on a frequent basis as to our achievements to this end? Thank you.
Yes, of course, it's a really important issue and it shouldn't be overlooked as we discuss the very many issues here. This is a moral outrage, and I think I speak for the whole House in saying that.
Graham Stewart.
Deputy Speaker, may I too congratulate the Prime Minister on his composure and leadership. But as his honourable friend, the member for Widnes and Halewood, said, we've got to ensure that we have the resources in place to tackle this. The whole of Western Europe is in the same position of being in a difficult financial position and a demographic position. So will he look again at finding the means to deliver our promises, because his leadership and his rhetoric has been fantastic. But going forward, we're going to need the hard power to back it up.
He's right, and that's why the conversation over the weekend has been about the specific issue of a security guarantee in Ukraine, but also, and importantly, the wider issue as to how Europe steps up more generally in its own defence, in spending in capability and coordination, and that's an important part of the discussion. We shouldn't just focus on the question of the security guarantees. They're part of the argument, but they're not the whole argument.
Alan Strickland.
Thank you, Madam Deputy Speaker, and can I thank the Prime Minister in these incredibly difficult times for the strong leadership he is showing. Would he agree with me that one of the many things that's become clear in recent months is that the security of Britain rests on a secure Europe? A secure Europe relies on peace in Ukraine, and peace in Ukraine requires a unified stance against Russian aggression. So would the Prime Minister agree that as free peoples in the UK, Europe, America and our allies, we must stand firm, we must stand together, we must show that democracy will be defended and tyranny will not be tolerated?
Prime Minister.
Well, I agree with all of that, and I think the House agrees with it too.
Jim Allister.
Madam Deputy Speaker, can I note with great appreciation the order for Thalas in Belfast? Yes. With Europe collectively being a long way short of self-sufficiency in defence.